to this conference on humanitarianism in education. And thank you to all of you who have welcomed to this glorious place, which is UWC Dilijan. So this is the third year running when we have been announcing the winners of an Aurora Prize, a Young Aurora Prize. The Young Aurora Prize, as you know, is a partnership between the Aurora Humanitarian Initiative, between the United World Colleges, between Scholar Mundi, and between Teach for All. It is the most wonderful reading, and no doubt there will be the most wonderful stories today, and it is wonderful to be here. My name is Julia Middleton. About 150 years ago, I started an NGO called Common Purpose, which is now, it seems to be more huge every time I look at it. It's about developing civic leadership with people. Other people say it's about waking up sleepwalking citizens, right? First, we're going to hear from Gabrielle so that we know more about UWC. Then we're going to hear from Nubar, who's chair of the judges of the Young Aurora Prize. And we've asked him to do something that he's going to be the first person who's going to be doing this today. He's going to start us off saying, looking back at my education, where were the germs, the seeds of humanitarianism that were in my education? Then we're going to hear from Veronica, who's going to talk to us about balancing humanitarianism and education. And of course, UWC is 5 years old. So we'll celebrate at the end of Veronica's talk. The finalists are before Veronica or after, I can't remember, one or the other, right? We're going to hear from the finalists, and after each presentation from the finalists, we're going to do a little manipulation of the judges. I'll explain that to you just a little. And then we're going to have a very, 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 very serious panel with 4 very serious people who are going to say, having seen that inspiration of those young people, what is it in education that we need to do more that will produce more humanitarians and not just bankers? It's not that I don't like bankers, and it's not that I don't know that there are quite a lot of humanitarian bankers, but we do need a lot of humanitarians too. So we're then going to have our very serious panel, and all the way through you're going to be inspired and remember the moments when your education prompted you to be more of a humanitarian, and then you're going to do #Aurora at school and tell us those stories. Then, Nubar's going to come and tell us who they've chosen as the winner, and then we're going to have a bit of a celebration. So everybody's in this morning. Let's start with Gabriel.
Good morning, Barry Lewis. Buenos dias. We're here today celebrating 2 different things that are connected. Aurora is about saving lives. It's celebrating people who commit their lives to the ultimate ethical decision, saving others. Education is the same. Education changes lives. The UWC movement is an assembly of 18 schools and colleges in 4 continents. 160 national committees, lots of volunteers, lots of staff, all of whom share one mission. Education is not an end in itself. Education has to be a force. A force for what? To have an impact. A force to unite peoples, nations, and cultures for peace and a sustainable future. And therein lies the connection. I like the British novelist E.M. Forster, who said it very, very succinctly. Only connect. If you read The Little Prince, it's about taming each other and establishing a bond that would change our lives. That's what we're here for, to learn and to live together. I'm pretty sure that E.M. Forster and Saint-Exupéry weren't thinking of Irish pubs or pizza delivery services or salsa dance at a restaurant on a Friday night in Dilijan, but that's just one symptom of what an international education really means. Why do we think that education has to have an action, a power, a force. Because otherwise, it's about me. And knowledge on its own is absolutely worthless. So today we're very privileged to welcome 3 teams of students who are making education a force. We have a team from Atlantic College in the United Kingdom, from UWC East Africa in Tanzania, and from UWC Pearson College in Canada. I'm going to come back to UWC Diligent now. 229 students from 80 different nationalities. Many would argue that it doesn't make any sense. Why would you fly people across the world to live together in the Caucasus, to experience significant cultural shocks, to learn Armenia, to learn that the French people are not what the prototype says on the TV, and to learn that actually not all Americans are the same, and that actually I didn't know where Armenia was. Now I know where Armenia is on the map. All of that is part of the bigger vision. We educate the students so that they realize that actually, as human beings, we share far more than separates us. And that's the key message of a UWC education, to realize that we share a lot. Kishore Mahbubani is a former chair of the board in the school in Singapore, Southeast Asia, and he was Singapore's ambassador to the United Nations. And he said, the problem of United Nations is that we think that we are on 200 separate boats with 2 separate commanders, captains, all of them with their own boat, with their own direction. Now we know that is not true. There is one boat, and we cannot have over 200 captains fighting each other, doing their own agenda. We need to understand we have one planet, one life, and it is ours. It's not individual. So with that, I would like to welcome Nubar. Thank you.
My name is Nubar Fayan, and I have the privilege of being a co-founder of the Aurora Initiative together with Ruben Vartanian and Vartan Grigorian, as well as having been involved as a supporter of the school and many of our other projects. And I cannot be happier and more proud of being here on the 5th anniversary of the school. The school, just like many other undertakings, as you'll hear later today of some of our finalists, starts out as a sense of a possibility and an obligation, and then what results kind of reaffirms that, and what we see today with all of you here is really a terrific thing. So I was asked to talk a little bit about traces of, in my education, that may have predisposed me to work in part on humanitarian issues. I don't consider myself a humanitarian. I'd like to rise to that level at some point, but I certainly am quite active to try to support what these extremely unique individuals do. And so in that regard, I'm part of a broad family. And I must say, trying to come up with an answer to this, I struggled because it's very hard to think in hindsight what might have been a contributor. Everything looks like it's a contributor. But what I thought I'd do is just mention very quickly 4 or 5 different ideas that, as I look back, I think did have a role to play. I was born and raised in Lebanon, and my education in Lebanon, quite surprisingly in hindsight, was a world-class education. We learned 4 languages simultaneously. When I eventually moved to Canada, I literally had done everything they were doing in the class that I was supposed to go into, and I didn't even know. And one of the things that education did was to actually give to me a range of possibilities to learn, and I think that how you apply it then, as we talk about humanitarian activities, is the next. But certainly the ambition was there, but one of the things I realized in looking back was that it was a very homogeneous kind of world I lived in. By being Armenian, I went to an Armenian school, and 100.0% of the people there were Armenian, and I was living with people that did not represent diverse views and diverse issues. Then I was exposed to civil war, and I'd say probably just for a whole year, going to school every other month for 3-4 days, and the fact that the teachers kept focusing on educating us, despite the fact that we had curfews and ceasefires and bomb raids, and we would literally run down. It literally, as I thought back on the drive here, I think the fact that the educators realized that despite all that, we had to actually learn things to be able to do something for the world was remarkable. The teachers we had were quite remarkable. They did not kind of give up and say, well, this place is going to be destroyed, so let's do something different. Immigration had a lot to do with it because I ended up going to Montreal in Canada where I spent my high school years, and I ended up in a Jesuit school. I didn't know the word Jesuit, I hadn't seen snow, I didn't know many things. But that act of immigration and the diversity I got exposed to in Canada, I must say had a lot to do with opening my mind to the different ways and different plights. I used to think Armenians have at that time, 70-year-old injustice, and then I realized that everybody has some sense of injustice and that they need to strive to make things better. And I think that my education, in that case it was a Jesuit school, I must say, exposed me more than just to the actual science and the arts, etc., but to this notion of morality and ethics. And I would not have probably received any formal exposure to that in a high school setting. I did, and it caused me to start thinking about tough choices that at an early age. And I think that's a super important part of getting young folks, and you'll hear from some of them today that are far ahead of anything that I ever saw, but really deal with these things early on. Books in general and the exposure I had to books, and in my case particularly, and those of you who know me, you'll understand why, I was fascinated by utopias and dystopias. There's a point in school where they make you read these utopian books that are meant to make the world look completely surreal and to make a point. I was drawn to them because I wasn't that interested in the way the world is. I wanted to understand how the world could be, for better or for worse. And I found a lot of inspiration in the worst versions because you could see how quickly things could be disastrous and to try to avoid that. In hindsight, I think that had a role with what we've ended up doing. And then finally, this notion of possibility and responsibility. I think that in an education, now we're born with infinite possibility and no responsibility. And over time, we chisel away at what we think is possible, especially for us, and we either do or don't take on responsibility. And I think there's critical lessons in exposure and education that can keep you realizing that all of it is a possibility for you, and that you don't have to narrow the range of things you might want to be involved with, and that responsibility is an individual one. For example, when I grew up, I used to think that taking care of suffering people and taking care and intervening in difficult situations was the role of government, was the role of international institutions. And thank God, neither of them did a very good job, because at some point, together with partners, we realized it's really up to individuals as well, and that there's, in a small way, things we could do. And exposing students to that early on, and the individual aspect of making a difference. The notion that I'd stand on a stage and talk to you about this topic has nothing to do with my PhD in biochemical engineering or my life in innovation and starting companies, and that's the point. The point is that if you say to yourself, well, I'm a doctor, I can go help people, but I can't do anything else because that's not my specialty, or I'm a lawyer or whatever. In every different profession, I think we can be drawn to this. And my education certainly, I think, prepared me for that range of possibilities. Last thing I just want to say is this immigrant mindset. A couple of years ago, I had the chance to address the UWC student body, and I said to them that among the biggest things they should take away from this is this notion of immigration. See, we think of immigration physically, and you're exposed to this because you immigrated here. You're spending 2 years in a diverse but also foreign place, and it's causing your senses to be tuned and to be ready for anything because you can't take anything for granted. It's all new, and it's a very stressful but at the same time kind of enabling moment. Keep that mindset throughout your life, because change is just immigration in thought. It starts with people thinking this could be different, and then realizing that you can, together with others, begin to bring about the change that you want to see. And that power of immigration in thought, in time, not just in physical location, is where education can predispose you to latch on to big, massive undertakings, ones that make you feel inadequate. If you feel inadequate trying to do something in the humanitarian sphere or anywhere else, that's exactly where you should be. And if you feel completely prepared for what you're about to do, my advice is don't do it, because there's 1,000 other people who could do it too. So those are the things that come to mind. I hope this is kind of at least a discussion starter, but I do want to say that what you've heard from me will be a very, very small input compared to what you're going to hear from our young humanitarians. And I'm super happy to see that level of integration of education and humanitarian issues taking place today, and also in UWC Dilijan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you. The first one, which is called Young Voices. Welcome on the stage.
Less and less young people across the globe are actively participating in their societies. This problem is a result of a glaring lack of civic education and civic awareness amongst young people.
Schools are overly focused on preparing us to be consumers and workers rather than active citizens, and I think this is emphasised by the fact that many young people think that voting is a choice rather than a duty, and it's highlighted in socioeconomically deprived areas where parents don't fill the gap left by the schools.
Young people's apathy, whether social or political, is staring us in the face. A strong civic identity and engagement in society is a massive step towards fixing this. This is why we launched our project, Young Voices, Peer-led Civic Education. We hope to protect young people's right to participation. We wish to educate and activate the young electorate so that they can participate in decision-makings that will affect them in the future. We aim ultimately to engage, educate, and empower. To these ends, during Project Week in March, we carried out a self-designed civic education program at 3 local secondary schools here in Wales, reaching over 120 students.
Our program has 3 components. The first part is a series of workshops on democracy, voting, and political systems, how the Welsh political system works, and why we should vote, etc. The second part includes workshops on global issues, sharing with students issues from our home countries. The third element is an election simulation, including a Conservative party, a Liberal party, and a third party. We guide students to read the information booklet, including each party's platform. Political candidates then deliver their speeches, which is followed by a discussion on how to fill out a ballot, etc.
Furthermore, we don't just operate on a local level, but also on a national policy level. We have already been working with an AC alumni, the Welsh Minister for International Relations, as well as the Welsh Youth Parliament, the Children's Commissioner for Wales, and the Electoral Reform Society to lower the minimum voting age in Wales to 16 and to incorporate civic education into the national curriculum, now under revision.
We receive overwhelmingly positive feedback from our participants. Even 3 months later, when we re-engaged with some of the 8th graders, they could still remember the workshops and remember how they were inspired.
With Aurora recognition and funding, we believe that this national impact is more likely to be achieved. Most excitingly, the Aurora funding would allow us to have global impact through the UWC network and from learning from leading projects in countries such as Norway. The funding will help us to learn about the best global practice so that our local and national provision is stronger, both in terms of implementation and policy.
Young Voices, engage, educate, empower.
Hi everyone, I'm Rosemary from China.
And I'm Blanca from Finland. Rosemary, did you see the news yesterday? Boris Johnson accepted the Brexit deal with the EU.
What? That's going to have such a huge impact on Wales. Wales receives the largest amount of EU funding in the UK every single year.
But why did they vote to leave then?
Well, this. Over the past 20 years, voter turnout in Welsh Assembly elections have been consistently lower than 50%. In socioeconomically disadvantaged communities, people share this widespread perception that politics is a high-up subject irrelevant to them. They think that they don't possess the power to determine their collective life. They think that they don't have a voice. They think that getting involved will not make a difference. And so Brexit is an angry vote. It is a sudden reaction.
When we piloted our civic education program at 3 different schools with drastically different socioeconomic backgrounds, we found that in the more privileged schools, the students had a much greater understanding of civic knowledge than in the less privileged ones.
Even though civic education is not provided in any Welsh secondary schools, in more privileged communities and schools, there are student councils and lots of extracurricular activities that help students nurture self-governance. However, in other less privileged schools, these opportunities are non-existent. So we began to think, how can we help all of our peers to better understand what does it mean to be a citizen living in a civic society? What does it mean, and how can we mobilize everybody to actively participate in building and shaping our communities? At the end of the day, how can we nurture the habit of civic engagement?
Our project, Young Voices, tackles the issue of young people's civic disengagement on 2 levels. On the local level, every week we go out to a local secondary school and teach our own self-designed program. We're also trying to make this self-sustaining by teaching the older students at the school how to deliver these workshops to their younger peers, hence keeping the peer-led approach going. We aim to empower, engage, and educate. We want to empower the students to grow into being active citizens in their societies. We want to educate them to make sure that they're ready to do this with confidence. And we want to provide under-resourced schools with the tools to give this education to their students, hence closing the knowledge gap between different communities. We also want the students to become engaged, to build a society together and create a sense of a civic identity.
Also operating on a national level, we're trying to create 2 policy change. First of all, we want to include civic education into the Welsh national curriculum, which is currently at the moment under revision. Secondly, we are pushing for the passage of the Votes at 16 bill, which would enable 16 and 17-year-olds in Wales to vote in the Welsh Assembly election by 2021. We're working hard with the Electoral Reform Society and the Welsh Youth Parliament in trying to persuade the Welsh government to adopt our policy suggestions.
So, what's the impact of our project? The impact is that we will empower marginalized communities, and we will make sure that every young person has an equal voice and an equal opportunity to engage in society.
And in terms of the impact, how to measure the impact of our project, we have been and will continue to conduct comprehensive surveys with our participants. Then we are conducting quantitative and qualitative analysis to track their acquisition of civic knowledge and their civic understanding. Finally, we're also using the size of our project, as in the number of schools that we reach, and the cost effectiveness over the long term as 2 key indicators of our success.
What can we achieve with the help from the Young Aurora funding? On a local level, we would be able to expand from 3 to 15 schools over a 12-month period. We also want to implement the self-sustaining model in all of these schools. On a national level, we want to create a kind of online community, an interactive free website that all the schools can access, where teachers and students can add their own material, like lesson plans and activities, where they can also inspire each other by blogging about their progress.
On a global level, we wish to extend our program to local communities in other countries through the UWC network. We want to have a big UWC conference and provide training to our peers in other UWC so that they will be able to teach and deliver these programs to local students in their local communities. And lastly, and more fundamentally, we believe that the Aurora recognition will give us legitimacy in persuading the Welsh government to adopt our policy suggestions. This recognition will also give us an important foothold in getting into less engaged schools, especially in more deprived areas. Over 10 of these schools have rejected us using the excuse of academic overload.
Without the funding, we will try to strive to acquire as much alumni and school support as we can. We may not be able to reach as many students, but we will try to have as great of an impact on the ones that we can reach as possible.
Now, in terms of the sustainability of our project, we believe that our project is highly sustainable because we are a newly established CAS activity and we run every week at UWC Atlantic. We have a team of both first and second year students and 3 staff supervisors. Over the past few months of developing our project, we have also developed a network of partner schools and organizations that help us both on the local level and the national level. But at the end of the day, more fundamentally, we believe that the true sustainability of our project lies in what we call the dandelion effect. Just as when you blow a dandelion, the seeds spread out and take roots in new places, each student that participates in our program is able to take his or her learning back to his or her community and make an impact there. For example, when we re-engaged with a group of 8th graders last June 3 months after they first participated in our program, this little boy here could confidently explain to the Children's Commissioner for Wales what does spoiling a ballot meant. And we really believe that it is in small moments like these that we truly see the impact of our project.
Young people's voices deserve to be heard, regardless of socioeconomic status. That's why we believe that we need to engage, educate, and empower. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, come on, words. What's shouted at you? Give me a word. Word, word, word. Impact. What? Say it again. Important. Engagement. Power. Empowerment. Go on. Voices. Someone back there, shout it louder. People. Is that what you said? Not chickens, people. Dandelion. You like that? Right. Thank you very much. Judges, I hope you're listening to the words. Yeah, right. So chickens next. Let's go.
Mama Stevie is a local Chaga woman and the wife of a maintenance worker at our school, UWC East Africa. She lives within 10 minutes of our campus and was the first recipient of our smokeless stove. This is her story.
Kwa jina naitwa Vanessa Steven Mushi. Mara kwanza kupikia kwenye jiko la mafiga kwa kweli niliteseka sana. Na sio mimi tu, pamoja na watoto wangu. Moshi ulikuwa unatutesa, macho alikuwa yanakuwa mekundu. Vile vile mtoto usiku alikuwa halali. Mimi mwenyewe pia kifua kilikuwa kinanisumbua kupitia moshi. Na matibabu huwa yanaongezeka kila siku na wapeleka watoto hospitali. Baada ya kupata jiko la kupikia sio la mafiga matatu, ndo nilipata ahueni kidogo.
After visiting here and hearing Mama Stevie's powerful story, we knew we had to act. We knew that this was an epidemic, not just across Tanzania, but in our very own backyard, in our community. And from there, the Smokeless Kitchen was born. The Smokeless Kitchen cast was born to help all the Mama Stevies suffering from respiratory disease across Tanzania.
Smokeless Kitchens is aimed at reducing and eliminating the overwhelming effects of smoke experienced in the kitchens of the indigenous communities of the Maasai and Chaga tribes in Moshi, Kilimanjaro. The project aims to do this by sustainably sourcing low-cost, high-quality smokeless stove that essentially acts as a heat source, with the difference being that they remove smoke from kitchen surroundings, filter it, and use less solid fuel.
Sustainability has always been at the core for initiative, being firm believers that any truly successful project must sustain itself for years and years. This is why our Smokeless Stove project is going to use the fundings from the Aurora initiative as seed capital for our ongoing project.
Ultimately, we believe that this project has the full capacity to help hundreds, if not thousands, of women across Tanzania.
That's why we thank you so much for giving us this opportunity.
Habari zenu, jina langu naitwa Kelvin. My name is Kelvin. I'm really happy to be here today with my friends.
Habari zenu, jina langu naitwa Yahaya. My name is Yahaya. I'm very honored to be here today. I've been living in Tanzania for almost my entire life.
Habari yenu, mimi naitwa Nicoli. My name's Nicoli, and like Yahaya and Kelvin, I've lived in Moshi my entire life. It's a true honor and privilege to be here today.
So just for context, this is a map of northeastern Tanzania, where we come from. And our school is located in Moshi town, and the major tribes in our vicinity are Maasai and Chaga, and then the communities we're trying to help. Well, interestingly, I'm Chaga, Yahaya right here is Chaga, and well, Nicoli's been living in Moshi for almost his entire life. We also consider him as a member of our community.
So, ladies and gentlemen, allow me to begin today with a truly startling statistic. Did you know that 11% of all deaths in Tanzania can be attributed to respiratory disease? Respiratory diseases kill more people than malaria, second only to HIV/AIDS. But what struck me the most about this statistic was that 30 to 40% of these deaths are entirely preventable. 30 to 40% of these deaths can be linked directly to poor ventilation in kitchens and to smoke inhalation. But where did our involvement in this initiative come from? How did we discover it was such a problem in our community? Well, Pamoja Tunaweza is an initiative that travels to some of the most rural villages, Maasai and Chaga villages in our region, and provides desperately needed medical support. I spent some time with Pamoja Tunaweza, and while there, I saw a disproportionate number of women and children suffering from and dying from respiratory disease. We worked out that this could be linked directly to poor ventilation in kitchens. And so this information really helped support us and really told us that what we were doing was truly impactful and had the potential to help so many women in our community. And we took it back to our team, and so the Smokeless Kitchen initiative began. This is a picture of our stove. It's not rocket science, it's very simple. And I think that's part of the beauty of it. It's very replicable. The metal plate that you see sliding into the box is what the fuel source sits on. It can use any fuel source. It can use a bio brick, it can use wood, it can use charcoal, it can use anything. Once you place the fuel in there, you light it, and then that door swings closed. And what it does is it creates a low oxygen environment, which means much more effective combustion. Also, because it's closed off, all the heat is funneled upwards onto the stove, onto the pot on top, helping to maintain the heat and keep it trapped inside. In the back, there's a pipe which connects to a chimney and funnels the smoke out of the kitchen into the surroundings. We are working at adding a sort of microfilter to reduce the emissions and reduce the microparticles in the air that are produced by the fire.
With the help of our stoves, we hope that the high rates of respiratory diseases in both Maasai and Chaga communities will be reduced. In addition, since these stoves use less solid fuel, Maasai women and Chaga women will no longer spend a significant amount of time traveling vast distances to collect firewood. Instead, they'll use more of their time to engage themselves in income-generating activities and thus boost their household incomes and empower themselves, as these women are marginalized members of their respective communities. We also hope that less trees will be cut for firewood because our stoves use less solid fuel. And eventually, also, we hope that health awareness on impacts of smoke inhalation will be understood by these communities because they use conventional ways of cooking that affect their lives. We came up with two ways to assess the effectiveness of our project. One was through the use of surveys, and the second was the use of questionnaires. But then we knew that the communities we're helping, most people are uneducated and most of them do not know how to read or write. Therefore, we understood that the use of surveys was better to assess the effectiveness of our stoves.
So, Kelvin has touched on bits of environmental sustainability of a project. Now I would like to talk about the financial and logistical aspect of our project sustainability. What we're hoping to gain from this today is not only the finances. We're hoping to get connection. We're hoping to get advice, support. Basically, we're here to learn and take what we learned back to a team in Moshi. The project is already taking steps to partner up with Pamoja Tunaweza, an organization that was already mentioned. With this partnership, we'll be able to find out the most in-need families because this organization has the data for the respiratory disease casualties. But us, together with the team in Moshi, have 4 plans that we're planning to implement. First, we're planning to make smokeless stove kits. First, we're planning to make smokeless stove kits. These are like our very own IKEA kits, which we'll be able to take to the villages, and the people in the village will be able to install the kits on themselves. Secondly, we are aiming to train 1 or 2 local ambassadors in each village we visit, who will then be responsible for installing the kits and for maintenance and repair if needed. We're hoping that these ambassadors will be women. Thirdly, regardless of whether we win the funding today, the project still needs to generate income. So this is why we thought of approaching the two communities we are firstly trying to impact in 2 different ways. As for the Maasai, with the help of Pamoja Tunaweza, we hope to approach the top Maasai leader, known as the Laibon, and educate them on what the leading cause of death of women and children in their community is. With the help of the Laibon then, in-need Maasai families will be provided with a smokeless stove, and in return, asked to provide us a goat, which will be sold in a pre-arranged deal with the local slaughterhouse, and the money will go into building more smokeless stove for the community. We have chosen this approach with the Maasai because they keep a large number of livestock. As for the Chaga, who are more educated and known for the tradesmanship in Tanzania, where in-need Chaga families will be provided with the stove and asked to pay 10,000 shillings each month, which is roughly $4 each month, until the cost is covered, and the money will go into building more smokeless stoves. Lastly, in reality, although we would love to work on this for a long time, we will not be working on this as much as we would love to, because we'll be graduating soon. Fingers crossed, we hope we get to graduate. So this is why we're involving students of every age in every step of our project to make sure that the project will continue far after we graduate. And it's a good thing that our school has a policy that each CAST project should have students from mixed grades, so this will ensure the project's sustainability. These are some of our team members back in Moshi. So, plans if we win. As you all know, we are not businessmen, and we're too busy writing our extended essays. So if we get the finances, we'll work together with our team in Moshi, our teachers, fundis or handymen, and local experts in our community to research the best way to build and transport different models of our smokeless stoves to the communities in need. We also need to sensitize the communities more to make sure to know what problem they're facing, because most of the communities are not letting us in because they have no idea what they're facing, but we want to sensitize them more. And spreading awareness about our smokeless stove. Plans if we don't win. Well, first of all, we'll cry a lot. Although we're limited to a handful of primary parents in our school, and most of the students in our school have very little disposable income, we can still do fundraising at our school. So we'll do everything we said we're going to do, but at a much slower rate. Thank you.
Well, Moshi, the place where we come from, in Swahili means smoke. Our project hopes to make Moshi without smoke. Pamoja tujenge Moshi bila Moshi. Asanteni sana.
I think whether you win or not, you have some converts here today. I'm involved with the Médecins Sans Frontières, and I'm sure they would buy anything you had to offer. Come on, have some words. Word. What? Health. Saving lives. Goats. Chickens, goats. How I could have called that chickens, I have no idea. Such a wonderful project. Go on. What are the other words? Come on. Humanity, local communities, health. What's the woman at the back saying? Another word from the back. The ones in the cheap seats, wake up. We want some words. Direct help, smokeless. Other words, come on, wake up. Shedri, children. Saving lives, entrepreneurship. I think we've influenced the judges enough, don't you? I think we should celebrate the end of that presentation by all coughing, right? 1, 2, 3. Right, next one. we have a very weird project. It's got precious and it's got plastics together. So there must be something behind this one. Welcome, Precious Plastics. Do you want the clicker? Yes, please.
Hello, my name is Eden and I'm from Vancouver, Canada. I'm in my second year at Pearson College, UWC. All of my life, I've had a strong connection with nature. I grew up playing in forest in British Columbia, swimming in rivers in Colombia, and going on camping adventures with my family. Since at Pearson, we live near the ocean throughout the year, and we study the ocean in class. The effects of plastic on marine life really became apparent to us and made us want to take action. I've always been mindful of the issues and consequences of plastic pollution. It is important to me to be aware and spread knowledge of the obstacles that the world is facing regarding plastics. In addition to this, it is important to act on these difficulties, which is why Antoine and I are working together on Pearson College Precious Plastic.
Hey, it's Antoine from Switzerland. I'm 16 and I'm studying at UWC Pearson College. All my life I have been in contact with nature. I spent countless hours hiking in the mountains, swimming in Geneva Lake and playing in the fields picking up flowers. Thanks to my family and the education I received, I developed a real passion for the conservation of our environment. Our project is to build a small plastic recycling factory on campus to fight plastic pollution. We are going to work hand in hand with Mechazin people, habitants of the nearest town, to build up the workshop, and in exchange we will offer them to recycle their plastic. The workshop and the machines will follow the plans shared and designed by the already established organization Precious Plastic in the Netherlands. At long term, we want this project to be self-sustainable. The facility will be maintained by the students from the Precious Plastic cast. Plastic will be collected from beaches, the cafeteria, the campus, but also from the neighboring community. The machines will allow us to repurpose waste into plates, containers for bulk shopping, cups and bowls. The production from the recycling of plastic will be sold, and the profit will be used to support initiatives on campus or for the maintenance of our workshop.
The plastics that are polluting our seas mostly come from landfills that drain to the oceans via rivers that flush through all of the continents, or they're directly dumped into the ocean itself. We were inspired to start Precious Plastic because of a beach cleanup that we did in marine science class together. We wanted to address the plastic pollution issue by acting by example, teaching others, raising awareness in the Victoria community, and by, of course, recycling plastic on our own. We will hope to drastically reduce the amount of plastic waste that the cafeteria and student store are producing every day, and hopefully encourage them to head toward more sustainable practices.
Hi everyone. Before starting, we just want to acknowledge how grateful we are to have the opportunity to present our project today in front of you.
Let me introduce myself. I'm Eden, I'm from Canada, and I'm a second year at Pearson College. I became very passionate about the ocean once I enrolled in my marine science class. This class, in combination with Pearson College's proximity to the Pacific coast and also UWC's need for action, inspired me to create this cast with Antoine.
Hi, I'm Antoine, also a second year. At Pearson, I learned a lot about the plastic pollution issues worldwide, but I felt a terrible gap between the values I was taught and the lack of action taken by the community. With Precious Plastic, I'm well aware that we won't be able to solve the global issue, but I truly believe that we can take Pearson College a step closer to the ideal sustainability with integrity.
Plastic pollution is one of the greatest threats to ocean health and therefore plant and animal health worldwide. It is connected to us because Pearson is the owner of Race Rock's Ecological Reserve, and it is also on the Pacific coast of Canada. There, we see plastic floating around in the ocean and entangling species such as the California sea lion and the elephant seal. We also see plastic affecting numerous organisms in our ocean.
The main problem is overproduction of plastic, and also no proper recycling practices. Plastic breaks down into smaller and smaller pieces, collects toxins, and is ingested by different organisms. According to National Geographic, out of all of the plastic on Earth, only 9% is recycled.
So how do we tackle these issues? The plastic we want to recycle will come from two main sources. First, the campus. We identified the three major producers of hard plastic waste, which are the cafeteria, the student store, and the residence. In those spaces, we're going to install some collection bins, and every week the precious plastic team is going to collect the plastic. Additionally, we also want to lead bi-monthly beach cleanups involving the whole community, not solely to educate and clean nature, but also to prevent from the further negative impact of the plastic on the beaches.
The plastic we collect will be sorted and sterilized into 7 different categories, depending on plastic melting temperature. These categories can also be seen on plastic products. If the plastic products categories are unidentifiable, for example, microplastics that we collect on our beach cleanups, then there are different methods to separate the plastics, which have been researched by the CAS. Here are both of the machines that we want to buy if we get the funds. The first machine is the shredder machine. So basically, the sorted plastic that is sterilized is placed in the top of the shredder machine, organized by color if we want, and then it comes out the bottom in small plastic pieces. Then those plastic pieces are put into the compression machine. The compression machine is, we call it the melter and molder machine, and basically it melts those pieces of plastic and then it molds it into whatever mold we have.
This is an overview of how the workspace is going to look like. So from left to right, we're going to have the sorting and cleaning area, then the shredder, then the stock with the different sort and colors of plastic, the molders, and at the end, the display where we could sell the final products. Here is a picture of example of shredded plastic sorted by types and by colors. And here is an example of phone case molds that could be in the compression machines and other different products that we'll be able to make with those machines.
We want our products to be practical, reusable, and multi-purposed. At first, we're going to make products like bowls and cups, which require very basic molds. And then later on, we hope to expand into more complex molds, which require more welding. And we would make binders, rulers, phone cases, for example, which would be used by students. To make sure that our products are food safe and dishwasher safe, we will treat the products accordingly.
With precious plastic, we have two main goals. First, we want to raise awareness and educate on the plastic pollution issues worldwide. We want our community to rethink and question their habits and value, and we want to sparkle individual realization by making people conscious of how much waste our everyday life is producing. Secondly, we also want to recycle plastic in our direct environment. And in doing so, we want to encourage all community members to head towards more sustainable practices. How are we going to measure those impacts? First, by the community engagement, either on campus as well as with the Mitchell's community, and the response from the advertisement on social media. Secondly, it could also be determined by the monetary gain from the selling of the final products and by the quantity and the quality of the product we'll be able to make.
Just like the well-known slogan, reduce, reuse, and recycle, we first want to encourage that everyone reduces their products that they already have and reduces the amount of plastic that they use. Then, we want them to reduce the products that they have, and then finally, then they would recycle the products that are wasted. Precious Plastic is an already established organization. It provides all the information and blueprints and advertisements to anyone who wants them online. Here are some examples of some precious plastic organizations that already exist around the world.
So what if we win the money? We're going to invest in getting the machines, the molds, but also in improving our workspace. Concerning the acquisitions of the machines, we have an updated budget, and we have two options. Either we can make ourselves the machines. This option is less expensive, but requires skills that we don't have, and we would need help from experts, which won't allow us to start as soon as we want. The second option is buy already built machines. This is the more expensive option, but we'll be sure and certain of the quality, and we'll be working within 3 months.
If we don't win, fundraising initiatives will have to be done, grants and online applications. If we do not get the funds for these machines, then the project can't run. If we do have the funds and we are able to buy the 2 machines, then the only extra cost that we are going to need to spend is if we want to expand the project and buy more molds and different things. Here are some pre-existing fundraising initiatives that we already have. The first one is our GoFundMe page. The second one is we've emailed and contacted numerous organizations which share the same mission and goals as us. And thirdly, we have been selling bulk bags at the school's bulk student store, and we have also been making marine plastic recycled jewelry for students to buy.
The project was first designed to be financially sustainable, since the maintenance of the facility will be assured by the profit from the selling of the products. We also think we're sustainable thanks to the well-respected character of the task and its uniqueness at Pearson College, plus the amount of dedicated students that work with us to make Precious Plastic happen. We also have a Facebook page, Precious Plastic Pearson College, on which we update a lot of information about as well the team, but also the project, and it helps us keeping in touch with everyone who's interested. You should check it out.
On Precious Plastic Pearson College Facebook page, you can see quotes and information from all the different team members that we have. So here are 3 examples, and they explain why they joined Precious Plastic, why they're interested, and what they've done in the past to make them so interested in this whole initiative. Okay,
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Cheap seats, let's have some words. What's that? Plastic. Right. Hearing. Sir, reuse. Danger. Nature. Over there. Environment. Legacy. Legacy. Come on back there. Something on the planet, saving our planet, yes. Keep going, can't hear you. All humanitarians have to be able to shout very loud. Yes, something renewables. Humanitarians should learn to listen to you. What? What did they say? Yes, we agree. Right. Thank you very much, everybody, and a round of applause for all 3 groups. Come on, groups, stand up and do another bow. Humanitarians all. Now we have a very special humanitarian, I think, if I've got the order right this time, who's going to come up and talk to us. Veronica.
Julia, I'm very humbled by your introduction and worried to upset you with my speech. It will not a few words. So it's maybe somebody asked the question, why humanitarianism, why education, how they are connected, what does it mean? So that, what's the main purpose of education? Education is about helping everyone to find their passion for life and what the purpose of our lives. This is my deep belief. This is the main role of education, to learn about yourself and learn what you're willing to do with your life and why we are in this planet and you yourself on this planet and who is humanitarian people? Who are they? What does it mean, humanitarianism? I believe that humanitarians are people who think and take care not about themselves, but about others, about their communities, about people around. That can be in different scale, but this is what really means. And it's about, both of this is about building bridges. And not create boundaries. What we see everywhere, unfortunately, is the new trend, in this, especially on political level, but more about creating bridges between different people. And this is what inspired me and inspires me to see happy faces around and make impact people around and make them happier and assist maybe in their life, that assist myself as well. So that I see it's very important that this place, and in UWC in general, it was created already 57 years ago by great humanitarian Kurt Hahn, who was thinking about how to avoid the Third World War, how to make people better understand each other. And UWC Diligent, when it was created by founders, it was the main idea was also to create bridges, to create bridge between and make Armenia part of the world, bring world to Armenia, and as being on the crossroads to assist all these people around to understand better each other. So then here we are, and it's hard to believe that it's already 5 years past. And we celebrate today also 5th anniversary of this school, which is more than just IB school, where kids from more than 70 countries study together, live together, learn how to understand each other, but it's more than that. It's about their building bridge between all these dots, and also to help people to understand their purposes and make them humanitarians in the field they have passion about, they have talents, and then to make people around them happier. So then I'm very glad that Julia, being humanitarian by heart deeply within all her life, agreed to lead this panel. And so welcome that they're all humanitarians who are build bridges, the bridge builders, and those who chose purpose for their life to serve interests of others. So thank you, and I want to welcome panelists on the stage. Thank you.
Great. Let's have Tom first. Come sit up here, Tom. Jaime. Have I got it right? Jaime. Woo! I think he's got some plants in the audience myself. No, I think you should. We can't have 2 men and 2 women. Yeah, that's better. Right. Falawi, there you are. Yes. Come and join us. And then Katia, come and join us. So who wants to go first, because then you can get it out of the way? Katja? Do you want to go first? So let me remind you, this panel is to say, right, so let's just be clear. If we spent the next period of today just talking to these guys about how they boil eggs, they would be interesting, yeah? We could talk to them about anything under the sun, and they would be interesting. When I first met all four, I asked them about their grandmothers, because it's a very good question to get to know about people, right? So there's nothing these guys couldn't talk about that would send us bored. But we don't want to talk about anything except one question, which is, remember your school, your schooling, your education, your formal education. Yes? So not what your parents did to teach you, not what your culture did to teach you, but specifically, what did your formal education do to prepare you to be a humanitarian? How did they plant those seeds inside you? And in some cases, it's how did they fail to plant those seeds inside you? Or even sometimes, it's how did they destroy the seeds inside you? Making sense? So each person, we're going to ask them some questions, and then we're going to play with the concepts. The outcome of all of this, I hope, is going to be a bit of a film that we try and send out to all of our networks to say, this is what some of the humanitarians that gathered together in October in 2019 in Dilijan and in Yerevan, these are some of the answers they gave us. What does that challenge us as educators across the world to do better? So let's have some of the stories first, yeah? Everybody up for it? Good. So Katja first. I think when we spoke, the thing that you talked to me most about was that if you wanted to be a humanitarian, in some ways you had to sort yourself out first.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. And I'd also first put out the disclaimer that I am neither a humanitarian nor particularly interesting compared to the other people here. I'm a student, a former student of UWC Dilijan who is continuing their schooling and aspires to be both a humanitarian and interesting. So this is...
Hang on, let's stop here. Now, okay, let's not give, I'm not going to let you get that away. So if I met one of your friends and your friend said, is this a humanitarian, what would they say and what examples would they give? So make the case for you.
I think perhaps they would say that I'm trying. I don't think that I have done enough or realized enough to have become the person, you know, that I would like to be able to call a humanitarian. I don't think that I'm there yet, but hopefully they recognize some efforts. But back to your question of having to sort yourself out first before you can begin to care and act on bigger issues. I think that this is something that I am perhaps qualified to talk about. I think as a young person, I'm still trying to figure out who I am and what it is that I care about enough to act on and to put energy into. I think growing up, I was faced with two quite different narratives. So I came here as a representative of Russia with the Russian National Committee, but I've lived for most of my life outside of Russia, and I'm, you know, you could say culturally confused a little bit. So most of my life was kind of trying to sort out two very conflicting narratives, and even though I was born like 10 years after the end of the Cold War, I still sort of refer to myself sometimes as a Cold War kid, because this is something that was quite hard to come to terms with. Now, I mention this because when trying to figure out what it is that I cared about enough to also come to UWC, why it was that
I felt that it was important to study with people from all around the world and from various backgrounds is because I think you get to a point where, narratives don't make sense anymore. And, fighting between two narratives for most of your life, coming here and then suddenly having to put together 200 narratives into a coherent picture, it's not possible. So you're forced to deconstruct your view of the world, and you're forced to rebuild it in a way that takes other people into account and make other people something that you care about just as much as you care about yourself.
You said something when we spoke, you said this place helped you to be Russian.
Yeah, as I said, I lived for most of my life outside of Russia, but all of my education was either American or British. And even living in Russia, the mindset amongst many of my peers was that the aim or aspiration was to eventually leave the country. And so to be Russian was not something to be proud of, necessarily, but it was also something that I could not lay claim to as someone who hadn't grown up there. And here was the first place, at the age of 16, 17, where I felt comfortable enough to say that I was Russian, despite the fact that growing into this national identity meant that I had to face the not so nice things that came with it as well. So how do you learn to be a citizen of a country while finding out from your peers that perhaps your country is not, or is responsible for certain things that you don't want to be responsible for, and how do you, again, reconcile this identity, national identity, with personal identity? Yeah.
And then also, you're not just Russian. So you don't have 2 feet in one place. You have 10 feet in 10 places. Is that right?
I would say so. I think at this point, having moved around quite a lot, but not just that. I think when you come to Dilijan, it's not just about, it's not like having a third foot in a third country. It's more like suddenly you are, scattered into a billion different pieces all over the place, and there's no, I think you do lose your footing. Even people who did grow up in one country, they come here and suddenly they ask themselves, where am I really from, and what does it really mean to be from a certain country, and how does that relate to the people around me as well?
Because I remember going to school where lots of the schools I went to, they said, look, we've got people from all over the world. But no one ever talked about where they came from.
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is starkly evident as well at university now, where we also have an incredibly diverse kind of
student base.
Yes, yeah. Student base, but diverse only in the sense of passports, not so much in discussions in the classroom, and not so much in representation in curriculum content. And before coming to UWC, I was very privileged to have an education where I went to an international school, but again, this was international on a very superficial level. And what I say that makes UWC so different from any other international school that I've ever been to or ever seen is the fact that not only are you bringing together students from many different countries, because you can do that, and that, that only does so much, that doesn't solve the problem. You have to foster an environment in which difficult conversations are encouraged. Difficult conversations that make you question your core beliefs. And I say this because it's a hard thing to come to terms with I don't know, for example, what your country has done to other countries, or what your privilege allows you to do that your friends cannot do. So I think UWC in a vast sense is supposed to be an equalizer, but it can only equalize so much, right? So you are still forced to have conversations about why certain educational opportunities are open for me, but they're not open for my friends. Why, I can complain about having to apply for visas, but some of my friends don't have passports. These are things that would have never crossed my mind, and perhaps some of my co-years as well before coming here.
So what do they do here that you don't do in other places?
I think the fact that UWC is built on the idea that not only are you studying together and not only are you kind of sitting next to each other in class, but you are eating together, you are living in the same residences, and it humanizes people. So it's not so much, I think the first question that you ask people when you come to UWC is, oh, where are you from? Because you want to put a country to the face. But after a while it becomes the face and then the country. And I think in that sense, UWC becomes a space in which you are allowed to love people that you would not have had the chance to in another context. And I think because of this, then when you see the country name somewhere, then a name comes to your head, the name of a person or a memory or, it's not like, oh, it's the Turkish girl making noise in the hallway again at 2 in the morning. It's like, it's not about that. It's more like, this is a person who, you have all of these stories in your head, and it's not about the countries anymore at a certain point.
So go on, tell them the story you tell me about, was it a song or a play?
It was a...
Go on, describe it. Were you there, was anybody there when she did this song?
It was a spoken word in my first year, so I think very few of you here would have been, oh, okay, I see a hand. This was March of my first year at UWC, and I found a girl who had an American flag dress. And I don't know where I had the idea to do this, but I put the dress on. I had a coat over it, and I turned around, and this was like a cultural evening. It was the Eastern European cultural evening. So the fact that I came in and showed up and did this, anyway, I took off the coat, and suddenly there was this American flag dress, and everybody was really confused because it was the Eastern European cultural evening, and the spoken word was basically all of the different stages of culture shock that I had when I moved to Russia at the age of 11. And with each stage, I put on a piece of my Russian national costume, which comes from a region that I'm not at all connected to, so that says, something else. But, and so by the end of this spoken word, I had my Russian national costume over this American flag dress, and I said, finally I'm at a point where I can say that I'm proud to be Russian. And this took years to get to that point.
And you think this journey is crucial to for the journey of a humanitarian?
I think absolutely. I think to care about people from different countries and to love your country are not mutually exclusive. I think you can be a proud citizen of wherever you're from. You can value your culture. You can, while also still being a global citizen. But I think it's important to understand what your base is, whether that is a country or a place or a set of values, and build on that. I think if you build that base while asking difficult questions about what it means to be those things, what it means to, to be Danish or Chinese or Russian or, come from a privileged background, and you understand everything that comes along with those labels, you understand that with privilege and with labels comes a certain responsibility. And I think back to the question of humanitarianism, it is about responsibility. It's not necessarily about going out of your way to do something nice for other people. It's you're in a position where you have the capability and the capacity to do something for other people, and thus you should. It's more, I think, of an obligation and a responsibility than, a choice, but I am young and still have much to learn.
Katya, you are lovely, and thank you very much for starting us off. Tom, I'm not going to embarrass you by asking you if I'm at least 3 times Katya's age, okay? I don't know how many times you are Katya's age, but would you describe yourself, are you as humble about describing yourself as a humanitarian as she is?
Well, I don't know. I don't answer that question. I'm definitely much older than both. I think I'm older than you too. Julie.
I'm 61. How old are you?
Well, I'm 55.
I will let you. Yes, I'm the
You
oldest.
win.
Yes.
You win this round, yeah.
Okay. I beat you.
Yeah. I'm not quite sure I understand the question.
I think I'm saying that I've read some of the things that Katya's done, and she's achieved more, I think, as a humanitarian than I had at her age. And yet she is still humble or worried about claiming herself to be a humanitarian. And I think she was sort of saying, if I'm right, that it's a journey and she's very early stage of the journey. But I don't know if you felt like I did, that actually it's a journey for everybody and nobody. Only your friends call you a humanitarian.
Right, absolutely.
You never call yourself a humanitarian yourself.
No, I see what I do as this is my work, this is the job. And I don't honestly see it as something very spectacular. I don't see it as something that nobody else can do. Maybe they can't do medical work in the mountains of Sudan, but they can do something equally as valuable. And I think for me that's a very important point to make with people. And we all have different ways of approaching humanitarian work. I consider myself a Catholic lay missionary, first and foremost, and whatever follows from that is well and good. But I don't think it's something that's the exclusive purview of a few people. And I think it's important, especially for young people, to have that idea that it's not something unreachable.
So when we spoke, the thing that came across to me was that your education didn't do a great deal for you as a humanitarian.
Right.
You use the expression, hang on, let me get it, lockstep.
Yeah.
Explain lockstep. Explain lockstep to people.
Well, lockstep is just you get on a track of doing something and you put the blinders on and you march straight ahead without looking outside. I grew up in the U.S. And my grandparents were immigrants, and the idea of coming and assimilating into the population and getting ahead, the American dream, you have to do better than your parents. And that always meant better financially. And the success was somebody who made a lot of money and had a lot of stuff. So I got into that track. You go through, I went to just basic public high schools in the U.S. in my hometown, in my home area is a very economically depressed area. I got to the track and was going ahead, and I did well in the sciences, so I wanted to do engineering. I wanted to do mechanical engineering because you could go to college after high school, do 4 years of college, and then you were done with school and you started making money. That was kind of my idea. And that's very much the idea I carried through primary school, secondary school, into college.
And no one ever questioned that in secondary school?
No, it wasn't something that, this was kind of the way things were supposed to be. This was America, the land of opportunity, and this was a very good thing to do, a very noble cause to go ahead and make your way in the world. But it was very much looking back on it, I didn't think much about it until we talked the other day. It was very much the way things were supposed to be, and it wasn't really questioned so much. You didn't question things. You didn't question your upbringing. You didn't question your values so much. I'm not saying I had fantastic values growing up. A very incredibly stable household. And like Katya, I grew up in my mother still lives in the same house she grew up in, and she's 88. So she's never moved. I mean, she lives at 130 Glen Ave, Amsterdam, New York, for 88 years. So very stable upbringing, fantastic values. But the idea of looking outside of our fairly narrow mindset was not there.
But then you went to college.
Right, so I went to college and I came in with my worldview, and not a bad worldview, but it was from one perspective. I think it wasn't until I got to college that I saw other people. I saw different races of people. I mean, in my hometown, you're either Italian American or Polish American. Those are the two options. And a mixed marriage is an Italian guy marrying a Polish woman. So you didn't have other races, you didn't have other religions. We were almost all Roman Catholic. So this was my first exposure to other people and other viewpoints. And it was very good for me. It was a way for me to open up my mind to different ways of looking at things. Not that I necessarily had to agree with people, but it was a way of seeing things from another point of view, which I never considered before. And that, for me, was the greatest part of my education.
And your education as a humanitarian?
I think that kind of got the ball rolling. So that, it was that opening up of my mind, which I think I got on the secular part of my college education, along with exposure to, it was evangelical Christians. That was a different way of looking at Christianity from my Roman Catholicism, opened up my sort of more spiritual side, and that prompted me to go into mission work. So it was a combination of kind of these two really quite different worlds coming together that I think propelled me into the work I'm doing now.
But then there's lots of humanitarians with humanitarian values, but they don't actually do anything.
Right. Well, it brings up a funny story. A friend of mine in college was a really funny guy, and he always said, you know, Bruce wants to be a humanitarian and save the world, but he wants to make 6 figures doing it. And that was the, you know, 6 figures in 1984 was a lot of money. And I think there's, for me, I don't think you have to be a religious person, but for me, this is where faith comes into it. And I can't have this discussion without mentioning this. That's what pushes me over the edge. You know, I think that's what made the leap. That we have a lot of Christianity, a lot of things, you know, you can't read the Bible and look at things and be passive. You shouldn't. This is what pushes you over. So if you want to call yourself a Christian, you've got to do certain things. And for me, I think that's what made me take the leap. And I'm not saying other people can't do it. That's not my point. But for me, that was what made me kind of shove me over the edge. Say, no, you can go out and do this. You have an obligation to go out and do this. Now that you can. I think a lot of it is just fear. When I see it, whatever your religious background is, just the fear of making that step. And the thought that you can't do it, that you don't have something to offer. And I think that's what holds people back. They like the idea of humanitarian work. They like the idea of going somewhere and helping, whether you're at home or you actually, you know, go somewhere else. But fear is what keeps them back. And I hope when I talk to people that I can offer them some encouragement that don't have that fear. If this is what you want to do, you got to, at some point, make that leap. You know, put the cell phone down and the social media and just make the jump and do it. It's getting much easier now to be passive because social media opens up the world to you. It was harder 20 years ago. You didn't have that. I think that's a negative. That's one negative thing I think about social media.
You also talked about Brown, which was the college you went to, gave a sense of possibility. Explain what that means.
Well, you know, growing up, I think my background was, as I was saying, it was an economically depressed area. And when you grow up in that environment, we were not poor. We were kind of middle class. And I had a huge family. I had six siblings. And, you know, my parents were Depression-era Americans. So you were kind of focused more on not out of trivialized survival, but more of a survival instinct. You just, you know, get a good job so you have a stable life and you take care of your kids, all this kind of thing. Going to Brown, that was it kind of opened up the world to, there are other ways of doing things. You can open up possibilities. Like maybe it is possible for you to go out of your little cocoon, travel somewhere and do something different. And it opened up the possibility that maybe getting us a very stable job and making a good salary was not the end-all and be-all. You know, there is another way of looking at life. And I think I wouldn't have gotten that if I had gone to more of a technological kind of school. I studied engineering in college. And if I went to a kind of if I went to a school that really just kind of where they were lockstep engineers, I'm not sure I would have gotten that perspective. I think Brown opened that up to me.
Maybe I misunderstood it, but much like the group from Atlantic College, that sense of people thinking it is not possible to change anything. Everything is the way it is, and however much I tried, it is not possible to change things. So it's not just the possibilities, but it is possible to do change.
Right.
And did that come from Brown?
I think it did, because I think it was just a general opening up of the mind. That, like, you don't, when you grow up in a more of this, what I was saying, lockstep environment, more closed environment, you don't get the idea that you can have an impact, that you can change things. I think that has to come from people that are are much more kind of free thinking, that are more open-minded about things. Again, it's not a matter of agreeing with all their positions. That's not it. It's a general opening of the mind, and it's. I think that came in university. Really, I didn't feel that before I went to university.
It's fascinating, isn't it? It's so different, because then if we abandon you, come back to you, Jaime, you're the opposite. So you got major humanitarian at school, and then you thought college was a huge disappointment.
Somewhat, but...
Okay, tell me about school first. Tell me about primary school. Let's go really back. Tell me about primary school, and then tell me about secondary school. How different was that?
So I just want to give out some trigger warnings, because a lot of this information probably most of my students or even my colleagues don't know about, so get ready.
Okay. Are you ready, student?
So,
are you ready? Are you taking notes? This is blackmail opportunities, yeah?
No. So most of my formal schooling was in Catholic education, and in primary school, nuns from Spain that had immigrated from the Franco period were running the school along with a mix of regular teachers. And the school's name was Santa Marta, who is the, I think, patron saint of servants and cooks. And so this idea of serving and serving God was very much kind of in our name. But yeah, the experience in primary school was a very strange one, because I was getting mixed messages all the time. They created a sort of national Catholicism in some weird way. So in the mornings we would line up and sing the American national anthem, and then sometimes in the afternoons we would be doing church or what have you. But in the classroom, I felt that there was this huge disconnect, and the nuns themselves, unfortunately, were not practicing what I thought they were preaching. Most of my memories of their faces were ones of frustration and anger, and not one of Christian values and love, like Margarita would say. So,
Maggie, you be quiet over there.
So, I think this tough love that they were practicing wasn't really, ringing true in my understanding, and the non-religious teachers were warmer than they were. And that might have to do with their experience and their own formation, but I was confused. I was confused, and I was getting mixed messages, definitely, in primary school.
So the teachers taught humanitarian values, but did not bring those humanitarian values into how they taught. Is that right?
Yeah, so our gatherings and our rituals were framed around this Christian ideal and missions, yet the way we behaved with each other and the way we interacted and the way that I was feeling was not very, let's say, inclusive or loved.
Okay.
Again, I'm making a generalization, but this is the kind of big picture.
Okay, I think you have some smiles in the audience. But it was different when you got to secondary school.
So in high school, I went to an all-boys, so I was separated from girls in the classroom and isolated with a huge community of boys. And there, the school's name was Damien High School. And this guy, Father Damien, was truly like a kind of, hero and God in some way. He was a Belgian priest who somehow ended up in Hawaii serving and helping leper communities, and he lived there and he died in Hawaii. So this was the name of our school, Damien High School, after this father. And instead of Spanish nuns, now I had Irish priests that were running the school. And it was a big boys club, but in some ways there were certain things and signals that, and here it was kind of inverse. We had some very kind of authoritarian Irish priests, but then the head of the college, he was really an incredible leader, Father Patrick. And he had a soft side, and he had a humility that really kind of modeled the type of school he was trying to create. And here the secular teachers, the non-religious ones, were really disappointing in many ways. I remember my history teacher, I mean, he didn't even care about history or any of the problems of society. He was hired to teach basketball. So he was just there as a coach, right? Because we created a very competitive environment where we had to, compete with each other. It was very much American values like Tom. But one thing we would do every year that really was a kind of game changer and started us thinking about others and definitely different realities was we would take a kind of project week or few days, and we would drive down from Los Angeles to Tijuana on the border with Mexico. And we did that every year, and we were building houses for communities that looked very, very different from the reality of our, suburban life outside of Los Angeles. And that was kind of planting these seeds of, we didn't have the, incredible focus of service that we have here at the college, but these small trips that were really experiences in encountering the other really started to kind of move you and shape you in different ways. And the really big thing that everybody wanted to do in high school, in Damien High School, was to become a senior. Because when you became a senior, you could break all the codes of dress. So seniors have some privileges that other lower classmen didn't. Very hierarchical society that we created. But the best thing about senior year was this incredible retreat that we were gifted. And it was volunteer. You weren't forced to go, but there was so much buildup around the community of how powerful, and it was very, very much hush-hush what happened there. So nobody would share, each generation wouldn't share with each other. And it was called kairos, which means in ancient Greek, an opportunity. And it was kind of like a rite of passage where we encountered the people we had been going to school with for 3 years, all the boys, of course, but we encountered each other in some very honest way. And I mean, the event was so kind of emotional that like I have kind of flashes of what took place. There was a religious element to it, but I don't remember that as much. I remember us being in church. What I remember is us together crying like babies because we were sharing different honest moments of things that we felt we had done wrong in the way we treated to each other. And we were openly kind of, fragmenting and showing vulnerability around a group that you knew very well. And then we were poured with love from everybody we knew by letters that had been collected in the previous months leading up to this moment. So we were together confessing in some sort of crazy moment of atonement, open in front of our principal of college. The code of conduct was thrown out the window at this moment. We were sharing things that nobody had shared ever. And after that sort of emotional kind of experience and kind of encounter, we were left to our own in the mountains. We found a tree, and we were reading these letters of how much we were loved and how much we were cared and appreciated by people we knew, our friends, our family. And that was an incredibly powerful way of kind of cementing some sort of values in us.
It was a very strange conversation with him, right? Because it clearly did it for him. Now, I know I wouldn't have been at this retreat because I'm a girl, yeah? But it would not have done it for me. I would have walked out or blown the place up or hit somebody. And so things, different methods work for different people. But it's a very interesting concept that you would have a rite of passage, that there would be some sort of moment. Because the more I listened to your school, the more I thought, whether they did it right or wrong, I don't know, but there was a very deliberate attempt to try and create humanitarians, and the ultimate end of that was actually a rite of passage to humanitarianism, which is so completely different from your story. It was Absolutely. Do you want to ask him a question? Anybody want to ask each other questions? No? Let's keep going then. Thank you very much. Falawi, tell us what you're thinking. You're allowed to have comments on what everybody else has said.
Yeah, I'm just sitting here and, I've been really reflecting since our conversation, thinking about what must have happened in my schooling or in my education. And it's not content, it's not fact. It's indeed a person, it's the people, it's the leadership. The reason why I say that is, so I come from a middle-income family, and my father left school at the age of 10. He dropped out from primary 4, but had such high value for education. We fled Nigeria to Benin Republic when I was 7, and this was due to the military regime. And I remember going to a school called International School of Benin, which was founded by an African American. But it was the most diverse school that I'd ever been. I got exposure to meeting other Africans from across the continent and even Indians, and we were all in this school together. But the big difference maker was Mr. Otumo, who was my teacher. And Mr. Otumo just took this interest in ensuring that every one of us found like there was a better version of us. Like, he had this deep sense of belief in every student who was in that school. There were a lot of Nigerians, so yes, indeed, a lot of Nigerians had fled at that point, and he is Nigerian. And so, right now when I think about it, I couldn't think if it was because of the fact that we had come into a land that wasn't our own, but this wasn't just us, this was also extended to the other people who were in that school. One of the things that I took from Mr. Otumo was empathy. He did deeply care about us, and he was selfless about it. I was sharing with her last night when we were talking that Mr. Otumo, we had this exam that we had to prepare for, and it was life science. And Mr. Otumo and the entire school, we knew that either his wife or his daughter wasn't feeling well, and we're at the hospital. And Mr. Otumo wasn't expected in school, but we're preparing for the test. And he showed up. And I didn't really define it as selflessness or empathy, but he just genuinely was concerned about us and ensuring that we were well prepared to sit for this test. When I think about my brother doesn't remember any education that he had, except for the education we had in Benin Republic, which is where we fled to. And he says the reason was because he left the school that we were in Nigeria, and he was not a successful student. He was, say, out of 15 students, he would come 13 or come 12th. And he got into this school, and a teacher, his own teacher, picked interest in him, and my brother would make honor roll for the 7 years that we were in that school. And so how does a student who, was, say, an F or a D student, how do you then become an A student and an A star? And so just thinking deeply about that, I started to think about the leadership of the school, which I never thought about. Mrs. Tunu, who was the African-American who founded the school, did believe that everyone, not just the teachers, but every student had some talent and had some purpose. Like, this woman would make everyone sing, dance, play a musical instrument, do karate, and do all sorts. And when I think about Mr. Otumo's selflessness, I remember that Mrs. Tunu had this cataract surgery. This was done by Mercy Ships at some point in Benin Republic. And this woman showed up in school with plaster on one eye and with 2 glasses, and she was still there present. And you couldn't even really understand the intensity of what she had gone through. And so when I think about what was happening in the school, because it wasn't just Mr. Otumo, it was also Mrs. Ayuk with my brother, I couldn't think about this leader who was ensuring and making sure that the school was working and the teachers were well supported and motivated. I'm doing the work that I do now, and in the schools that I found to be the most transformative, I found it to have the most dynamic, vibrant, and committed head teachers who are supporting their teachers to just be excellent and to go above and beyond to do their best.
So education, sometimes the danger is you use the word education, you think of a system. And you're saying it's more than just a system, it's a series of individual teachers. And it's not just a system and a series of individual teachers. It then needs a principle to create the culture so that the teachers become humanitarians, and then they can make and help the young people. So it's a whole microclimate.
Yes, it is. I'm going to just share an example. So I lead the work at Teach for Nigeria, and I remembered just an experience that happened in my school in Benin Republic. They had called for this art application, and everybody was to paint. And I can swear to you that I have not one vein of creativity in my system, and I wasn't going to apply to this art program. And Mr. Otumo encouraged me to apply to it, and he supported me all through. I think we went through about 3 paintings, and I painted, and I won the award of the one who won the best art at work. He said something to me during that experience, and it's one thing that has carried on with me for life, and it's nothing is impossible. He said everything is impossible, and you can be whatever it is that you choose to become. I remember starting Teach for Nigeria, and before Teach for Nigeria, there were 3 CEOs before me, well-experienced individuals who had tried to launch Teach for Nigeria as far back as 2014, and none of them were able to. I was only 27 when I applied to join this organization that was thinking about starting, this program that would recruit young graduates and professionals to teach for 2 years. And that sense of possibility, that can-do spirit. And the reason was, people said to me, it's impossible. Like, 3 people have tried, you think you can do it. Like, they had said to me, you wouldn't be able to. But there was a seed that Mr. Otumo had planted. That can-do spirit, that nothing is impossible. And I said, I'm going to give my all and do this. And, when I think about just how that impacts individuals, like it's beyond, I'm seeing what is happening with the fellows and the participants who are joining our program. And it's that reflection, it's still that continuation of the inspiration that this man indeed planted within me.
So is this ringing any bells with anybody in the audience? It is. I can see some nods. Anybody want to give an example? Or anybody want to ask anybody a question? No long statements, but any thoughts that are coming to your mind? Come on, this is UWC. People don't hold back here.
Thomas spoke about his college education at Brown, but he didn't touch upon his training as a physician, which I hope, I'm sure it made a huge difference. Can you tell us something, Tom, about it?
I'm trying to think back to my medical school days. I think still it was still focused more on, I think it's changed now a bit. Now they have these global health programs which open people up a bit. But when I was going through medical school, it was still more of a lockstep. The official program was more of a lockstep thing. I went to a very kind of a high-tech medical school that was more focused on producing cardiac surgeons. And nobody went into even primary care. Everybody went into subspecialties. So I think it was still very much focused on lockstep and on going out, being a doctor, and making a ton of money as a medical doctor. That was still kind of the focus. I think things are changing now, and I'll be at my medical school soon. And actually, I'm going to talk there. It's going to be it's a combination. It's the Duke Medical School and combined with the Divinity School. And I'm very curious how the attitudes are now compared to 25 years ago when I graduated. I hope it's changed. I think for medical doctors, the big complaint about doctors is always they're too impersonal. That you go in, they're very brusque, they're very rude, they're this, they're that. So I hope the attitude has changed, that this idea about our work, especially as physicians, is very much a human profession. It's all about the individual, about the human being and the humanness in somebody. And if you lose that, you're not doing anything. I mean, you're just passing out pills or cutting into people. It's not what we're supposed to be doing. So I'm curious to see how it goes when I go there and have this talk, and I'll be meeting students and other people. I think from what I've read and seen over the years, I've been out in the US for so long now, I think the attitude is changing somewhat with time. It's very good, yeah. Sorry?
You can ask him that at lunch. Ask him that at lunch.
Yeah.
You just want to know what school is that?
Okay. Remember to tell him at lunch the answer.
Right, I'll get your next.
Katia, you said to me, I think also, is that you have to be an institution where the word why is used all the time. Why is the word why so important?
Doesn't like me very much. Okay, it's working now. I think the word why is a cornerstone, or should be a cornerstone of education. And I think this was maybe encouraged, or is encouraged in many schools, but is actively encouraged, especially here. You ask yourself why things are the way that they are, why things should be the way that they are, and if the answer is they shouldn't, then the question becomes how you change that. But I think it comes back to the question of kind of why we do what we do and why we care about what we care about. And to do that, you have to ask the difficult questions, like, why am I in a position of privilege when I don't deserve to be any more than other people are, or things like that. So I think in a formal educational environment, you need to ask as well why, regarding academic information. So the teacher tells you something, you should say, well, why is it like this? But also in a kind of personal sense, and particularly when you're studying with people from a diverse background, I think.
I have a lot of children, and I remember them. I remember the occasions when I answered why. Children are always asking you a why question, and you're usually doing something else. So you say, shut up and go away. And then sometimes you do, but the temptation is to avoid the why questions. Do you think teachers try and avoid the why questions sometimes?
That's a good question, because I know I avoid the why with my little sister, which is bad, because I say that it's important to answer it. I think teachers, I think it's important that they create the atmosphere in which the why is asked. Whether they avoid the why is a different question. I don't think that, especially here, I don't think teachers actively avoid the why, but I think perhaps in other institutions or in certain circumstances, teachers, it's not so much that they avoid the why questions, it's that they don't create the context in the first place where students can ask. And I think that's the big difference, is that the teachers have to create the space. So it's not just what they say, but it's kind of the spaces in between where the students have to say something as well that are just as important.
And I suppose you can always avoid the why question by not creating the space, by saying, sorry, this is the end of the session. It's like the management meetings, sorry, it's got to finish, so we can't actually ask ourselves why we're doing this, do we? But the why is, you're nodding a lot, Falawi.
I'm nodding because this is something we encourage in my organization. And it's the reason why we encourage it is your why could constantly be evolving. And it's the why you're doing the work that you're doing. And the work that we do is so tough and it's so hard that you constantly have to remind yourself about why you're doing it. And so it's one thing that we encourage, but when I think about it in the school system, and I think about the teachers that exist, it's culturally, first, as a child or as a student, you're not even allowed to question the teacher. So, asking them why, so I was nodding because, the teachers don't even want, like they don't create the atmosphere, but then also culturally and the system doesn't even encourage for the students to ask why. You're talking to your teacher and you can't even look them in the eye to respond to them, you know, because you're to respect them, and you questioning them for them seems like you're not respecting them. So what I've seen with like the participants of our program is you have to, some teachers say, oh, but they're disrespecting the teacher because they're asking questions, because they're really laughing with the teacher, or they can sit in the teacher's chair. Like, they really struggle with it. But when they see the result of what is happening in terms of learning outcomes, when they see that kids are coming to school more, then they start to see the value in creating such experiences and relationship with the students.
But this is, I mean, I have a sick child at the moment, a child who's 30, but still sick. And last week, these doctors were saying she's got to have this test. And you were saying to myself, well, I ask them why, because I want to. But if I do ask them why, they will think I'm questioning their judgment. So it is actually very difficult sometimes to ask a teacher or a doctor or anybody in a position of authority why, because they go prickly. Or even a Russian saying, why did you do this? Yeah? And then you go into a panic and you go all defensive, don't you?
Briefly on that note, again, with questions of national identity, it's easy when you are living in a country where everybody is of the same national identity, because your narrative is not encroaching on anyone else's in the same way that it does when you have people from 80 nationalities together and everybody's story is stepping on each other's. And so it is instinctive to get prickly, not only with that, but with like I said, other labels. You want to become defensive, but you have to be open to the idea of people challenging your ideas, and that perhaps you are not right, or that your beliefs are not the correct ones.
So humanitarians have to ask why. That's right, is it?
The goal is to find the truth. I think in the end, that's what education is about. And I think you always have to be searching for the truth in a very open way. And I think what's happened in the current discourse of events in the world is that you think you want to express your opinion or say something, and someone attacks you immediately and starts labeling you. And that is not education. So we're going, I think, backwards. Education is hearing what somebody's saying and coming back with a counter argument. So, well, I don't agree with you, and this is my reasons why. But what you get is someone expressing something and then you attacking them, which is really, I think, is not helping us.
Could I just say something about the why? Because, our second-year students are looking into the future and trying to decide careers, and very much echoing what Tom has said, right? This idea of how do I make sense of my life, but also I need to make a living and have some income. They are going to spend, all of us will spend, 80,000 hours working in our professional careers. And there were two students that came out of university very much, a little bit with very different aims and goals. And they decided to figure out what happened with the system that didn't help me find my purpose, didn't help me kind of gauge what I felt was important or what was going to give me meaning. And these guys, I don't know where they graduated from, some Ivy League university, I think, but they produced this thing called 80,000 hours. And it was a way for students, and I encourage all my students and the college counselor here and everybody to not just decide what career they want to do, but what are the things that really connect with their personal political paradigms? What makes you angry? What are you very, very rooted in? And how can you start to design not just I'm going to be a doctor or I'm going to be a teacher, but what further subcategories can help develop that? Purpose and aim. I think Andreas has a comment.
Well, I think it's a wrong question, actually. The why question, why? Actually, and we don't know why. We don't know why we are alive. We don't know why we are dying. We know nothing, and we just have to accept it. And as a humanitarian, the why question is somehow a philosophical, it's a theoretical, let's say, approach, but the main question is how. That's the only real question we should ask ourselves.
I respect that view. I don't happen to agree with it. For me, how is really easy once you've figured out why you're doing it and you have enough of a burn. But does anybody want to say anything on that one? Can I just try something completely different on you? I was interviewing some people on this question over the last 2 days, and you got this very weird answer as well, and proposition, right? That schools that produce really driven humanitarians are the ones who are completely in lockstep. They never talk about ethics. They really don't care about humanitarianism. They refuse students when they ask them why, and they wind the students up so much in their narrow-mindedness that the students in the end become rebels, and they almost create humanitarians by default, because you become a humanitarian because you're fighting the system you're in rather than you're inspired by the system you're in. Go on. Yeah. Why are you nodding when I said that?
Well, you are. So actually, humanitarianism in education is a false question to question me. I am grown in Iraq, actually. I left Iraq with 20. So I was in a village. I am from Yazidi community. Our village was completely neglected by the government, Iraqi government, because of many of political reasons. So our school was less than an ordinary schools. And we have in Iraqi curriculum never a sense about ethics or something like that. The only lecture that we had, for example, nationalism, and I escaped from the school during the lecture of nationalism because it was indoctrination of Ba'ath Party. We had to dress the military dresses in the third class, and I was lucky that my father was a chief of a local tribe, therefore the teacher couldn't punish me. But so therefore the school actually was not that a place that I learned my engagement in the humanitarian. Maybe within the social atmosphere of the school and the role of the teacher, for example, I had a teacher, an English teacher who was a Muslim, Arab Muslim, and teaching in our area. So he was actually 150 kilometers from his people, and he was teaching actually in a region which is called by the others infidel people, because the Yazidi are not accepted among the majority in Iraq. But this guy, he was so lovely to the students. He did everything in order to encourage the student to learn, to have more vision. I started to read so very hard stuff and books. Even Sigmund Freud, I read all his with 13 and 14. I started to write poems and short stories with 15. So I think one of the reasons that the teacher is playing very big role, even the curriculum, just like ours, so bad. Thanks.
So you became a humanitarian despite your education. So who became a humanitarian because of their education? Hands up. Who became a humanitarian despite their education? Interesting. We have an equal then. So any thoughts on that subject? No? There's a question over there. Go for it. Do you want to run up here and grab my mic?
So I have a question about failure in school. There's a very clear line of like, you either pass a test or you fail a test and all that. And I've cried over many tests that I've failed. And I want to ask the question, do you think failure in school contributes to apathy towards becoming humanitarians? Because so many people think it might be easy to fail at becoming a humanitarian.
Fantastic question. Who wants to answer it? I never succeeded a single test in the whole of my education. In France, we used to have a carnet at the end of each term, and on the carnet, you would have your marks. And if you had 0 out of 20, you had a little red line underneath it in case your parents didn't notice that you'd got 0, yeah? And my carnet was just red lines. And for me, it was proof that I could do it despite failing. And I never succeeded in what they thought I should succeed in, but I did succeed in what I thought I should succeed in. Now that might have produced a rebel, and I often behave badly, and I know that. But I believe that to be a humanitarian, you have to live most of your life in failure. Because however much you want to change the world, you will not change it enough, yes? And whenever you go to a really tricky meeting, you will always come out and sit in bed that night and think of what you should have said rather than what you did say, yeah? So you spend your entire life making a fool of yourself and failing. And failing at school is a fantastic preparation to be a humanitarian, in my view. But I wouldn't recommend it.
Could I take that question on?
Yes.
Well, I think it's a fascinating question, but I would encourage students to remix this, and it's not the test that's important, right? Those are all rehearsal exercises, but I would say forget about the test and the results of the test, but through the process of learning, and that's what's important, there's all sorts of failures and mistakes and making sense of the world.
I tried that line on my parents, but they still saw the red line under the 0.
The numbers don't make justice to the process.
Okay.
I just wanted to add, there is a level of resilience that is required to do the type of work, that humanitarians do. And I think what happens with the experience of failing, and I'm thinking about the story of a lady that I met 2 weeks ago who said she was disowned by her father. That's to the extent where she failed and she was just, a prodigal child. But then she has succeeded in inspiring and empowering young girls. And this was somebody who completely failed. So when I think about failure, for me, it's how do you use that resilience where you fail, keep failing, but then at some point you think about the process and the muscle that it develops in you to say, I will keep trying and doing the best that I can do until I succeed at my purpose or what I found to be my purpose.
And Tom, you said at the beginning, if you can do it, then don't do it. You should be doing things that you can't do.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think humanitarian work in general is much more about the heart than it is the brain. Not to dumb it down, but it's what's inside of you that in the end is gonna see it through. I mean, if you sign on to this, if you really want to do humanitarian work, you're gonna suffer at a lot of points along the way, and what's going to keep you going is your internal drive. And I think always succeeding. What happens with that when you're always a success is once you hit a bit of adversity, you can crumble because you're not used to it. It's like, oh, what do I do? I was always, top of my class, and I excelled at everything. And now I'm hitting some frustrations. I'm not used to this. What do I do? And they can't manage. If you're used to a bit of adversity coming up, now you're much more suited to the humanitarian work.
I think with young people in the room, we should move away from success and failure as it relates to humanitarian work. The way to see it is if you're even able to just put a spark of brightness in this dark world, that's it. It's not about how you succeed or how you fail. You go into doing humanitarian work because There's a lot of upside downness in our world today. I don't even know if that is a word, but your duty now is to create hope in all of this. So whether you succeed or you fail, because by trying to measure failure or success in our humanitarian work, we will kill ourselves, because you make one big or one small stride here, and you look back and you see 250,000 different negativity that you have to go back to do something. So it's about telling yourselves, young people, if I've touched one life in 80 hours, 80,000 hours of work, I've succeeded or I've done well.
This microphone doesn't like me. On that note, I wanted to share something that my dad said after, it was either after mine or my sister's graduation from UWC. And of course, the ceremony is something that is supposed to be very inspirational, and there are a lot of kind of big dreams and big ideas that are thrown around. But my dad said, is this not a little bit too idealistic? And I said, you leave this place, and I can only speak for myself, and I can only speak for kind of my experience here. But if you leave this school believing that you are capable of doing something and that your actions have the potential to make an impact somewhere on someone or on something, that's going to make you want to pursue that. And I think it was very clear on my gap year that, you know, the world doesn't care about whether you think you can do something, you cannot do something. It's going to, like, give you a slap in the face, and the important thing is to still continue despite that. And I think so. I would say no, it's not too idealistic, and it's important that hope is the most important part. It's the holding on to something that is like, why do you keep going? Because inevitably the world is going to step on you. So you have to have something that's big enough to last once you leave, I think.
Yeah, I wanted to comment to one thing.
Tiny bit louder.
I would like to comment to your comment that everybody is frustrated who's a humanitarian. I know very much that situation, because I, as a 16-year-old, was sitting in India after having done some social work for like more than 3 months. And I was like, this was just a drop and it's evaporating in the sun. However, then the Minister President of the Uttar Pradesh came and said, look, we have never had white, male or female working with our Indian villages. And just that you had been there for this short period of time will give me a lot, and will give all these people a lot. And so what I would like to say is, to everybody who does the tiniest bit, never give up. Always think about this one moment, which actually says, if you touch one person, you will touch very many. And my question would be to your candidates, well, how can you touch, and what was your personal impression and how you thought you can touch?
Hang on, he's trying to say something to me. So do you want to answer? Should we have a few questions, and then they can answer whichever they want? So there's a lady in, the girl in this, that's it, in the striped jacket.
So my question is kind of related to this and also to what Tom was saying before. So you were saying that anyone can potentially be a humanitarian, anyone that is trying to improve someone's lives, either in his or her own community, but also anywhere else in the world. And I have this dilemma regarding helping someone from another community. And I always ask myself how this would be perceived by people, like someone coming from the Western world and trying to help and give aid to communities that are disadvantaged in some ways, and if this could be perceived like as an offense in some ways. So yeah, if you have an answer to this, thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Yes, I want to ask a question, but directly you.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh dear.
So what happened actually is, I don't know whether one has to be a fellow before he becomes a humanitarian. So that is the question. But obviously there are certain
Say that in question.
that
You have to be a something before you're a humanitarian.
no, you have to be a fellow, right? That is what in fellow, that is you fail before you make a humanitarian. Is that what you're saying? Yeah.
No.
So
Yeah.
the question is it in figures that one has to be a fellow? Or there are certain people in classes that are very poor in terms of when they are rated in exams. But when you come to leadership, they give the best, understand the diversity of people, and also play inclusive institution where they include everybody in their leadership policy. So will you call that person a humanitarian? You can call him a humanitarian, but will you call that person a fellow just because he fails in figures? So that is what I'm just. Thank you.
I've got that question. Maggie.
It's not a question, it's an example, because I was a teacher and they put me outside after 5 years because they said I have not the humanitarian, according to government, that I can't teach Burundian young people. But after I refused, I said, I will create myself because I see that at school, there is no humanitarian values. Then I want to say to young people here, don't be afraid, refuse when you see that what they teach you, it's not according to humanitarian values, because it depends of regime of the government. Then after they put me outside, I was young, 24 years old. Now I am 63 years old, and I create myself schools, and we succeed. After the government admired, finally, our schools, my school, what I create. Then young people, don't be afraid. Create yourself. If you feel in your heart that it's correct, don't be afraid. Thank you.
So we have some questions. You can choose which one you want to answer. So we've got some questions about how do you know if you've been successful? Come back to you. We've got some questions about defining failure. There's some questions about sort of cultural imperialism. If I'm loosely, yes, you're nodding, that was your question. So we've got quite a mixture of different questions. You can answer whichever one you want. You can't answer all of them. There's one question I think you're desperate to ask, very quickly.
Hi, I'm curious about Teach for Nigeria. As a young Nigerian myself, I would like to know how I can contribute to Teach for Nigeria.
That's not a question, that's an offer. That's brilliant. Any more offers, please shout, right? So which question do you want to ask, Katia? Which question do you want to answer?
Okay, I think the cultural imperialism one, because I don't have an answer for it, but I think it's something that I definitely struggle with. this, I mean, the very fact that I'm on this stage right now, I think that there's a certain degree of guilt that I'm given this space to speak and to share what I feel is perhaps not as important than the stories of some of the people that I studied with, and a perspective that is no more valuable than other people who could just as well have been here. I think as pertains to doing or aspiring to do humanitarian work in future, it is a question of where do you put your efforts and what you are qualified to apply yourself to. And that's why, I mean, in my gap year, I went back to Russia to try and do something, but I mean, despite the fact that I'm Russian, I'm coming as a foreigner to my home country to do work, and there's also a sense of, am I coming back because I feel like my Western education has been more, you know, worthy than I would have had.
Falawi, answer her question. Answer that question and that question.
So when I think about sort of doing work outside where you're from, I think it's important to identify and understand that there are assets that exist in communities, the examples of leadership, and they're like the sort of like beacon of hope that exists in those communities. And just not going into the environment or the community with like a lack of, you know, sensitivity to the fact that these leaderships do exist. And how do I amplify and how do I support and improve on those assets that already exist? The work that we do, I think it's super important to invest in local communities and in the people that are closest to the issues and the challenges. And so it's really understanding the people, it's understanding what the issues are, where the assets are, and finding ways to amplify that. I wanted to just share a story that has stayed inspiring me, and just with the comments.
Make it a short one.
Yes, it'll be short. It's the story of the hummingbird. And this happened somewhere in sub-Saharan Africa where there was burning fire in this forest. The hummingbird, for all of you who know, is a bird, it's a species of really tiny birds. And all the animals in the forest were coming out, and this forest wouldn't stop burning. The hummingbird went to the nearby river and would pick water and drop on this burning forest. And every other animal stood behind and they were just watching. And the elephant asked the bird, "Why are you doing what you're doing?" And he says, "I'm doing the best that I can." It was only the hummingbird who was doing what he was doing. And just again to reiterate your point, to say that we all just have to continue being the hummingbird, even in the midst of this wildfire and just the crisis that we're facing across the world. I just wanted to share that.
So I think rather than answer all the questions, I think we're going to finish on the hummingbird. Thank you very, very much for listening to us all. And Nubar, can I ask you to come back on the stage?
All right, so let's see, we need the folks who are helping us with this. You ready? Okay, so the group of judges of which I was selected as the spokesperson met. There's 5 of us, and we discussed thoroughly the projects. I'll say that each of them touched each of us, both intellectually and emotionally. Each of them is going after very important concerns and causes in very, very different ways. The professionalism of presentation was really noteworthy, great, well beyond the level of, student maturity that we experienced, I experienced, maybe you experienced, but this was really quite remarkable. And all of which is to say that we had a very tough task. We didn't kind of reach a consensus immediately, which is reflective of the merits of each project. We didn't reach a consensus even at the end because there were variations, but we all thought that all 3 projects were meritorious. So we did what every judging panel does, which is to argue with the organizers whether they'd let us have all 3 win. They said no. Then we tried to have various combinations of the number 1 and 2 to kind of try to fudge. They said no, they're very disciplined here at UWC Dilijan. And finally, they basically said, look, there has to be somebody, even if everybody's meritorious, that's selected as the top one, with the other two as being the runners-up. And we relented, and on a fairly close basis, we decided what that would be. So I don't know what the format is. We could maybe invite all three groups to the stage, and we can applaud all of them. Please come up to the stage. Congratulations. I'm shaking your hands on behalf of everybody here. Congratulations. All right. All right, let's see. So one other thing I'll just say is that the way this competition works is that this project has, of course, invited these teams here to present, and the prize amounts that have been indicated are $4,000 to support the project of the winning team, and then $500 for the two runner-up teams. We've had a bit of an intervention in that we have decided as a judging panel that the runner-up teams both should receive $2,000 and not $500. And so they can either combine and make sure one of their projects get done for $4,000, or they can find another $2,000 based on the validation that this represents. So we hope that the audience is supportive of that outcome. So with that having been said, let's see here. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. You guys are gonna stick with me. She's gonna give it to you. Don't flip it yet, just hold it like that. There's a little drama for you. So don't look. They can see, the whole crowd can see. So we're gonna ask them, so look, everybody is a winner. First, can I just ask you guys all to applaud everybody? A little more. All right. You guys all deserve it, really. Tons of hope from these projects. So this is a little corny because every time, there's no good way of doing this because, you've all won. But what we'll do is we'll ask you to flip it simultaneously, and I will, at the same time, announce the team that was selected as the winner. So on 3, 1, 2, 3. The winning team is UWC East Africa. Good job. You guys were great. You guys were all great. So, thank you, congratulations. Those two guys, you guys are fantastic.
Well done, guys. You had a really good project, man. You had a really good project. Great project. Yeah, well done, guys. Yeah, I just want to say thank you to Mr. Morley and our team. First of all, thank you so much to Aurora and Young Aurora and UWC Diligent and everyone for having us and for hosting us. I'd also like to say a massive thank you to Mr. Morley over there. Mr. Morley, stand up. Mr. Morley is technically supposed to be our supervisor, but he's been so much more than that. He's guided us, he's led us. We wouldn't be here right now if it wasn't for him. So thank you so much, Mr. Morley. Yeah, one more round of applause. Come here. Thank you, sir. Well done, guys. Also, I'd just like to give a massive shout out to our team back at UWC East Africa. We wouldn't be here without them. They've done so much to make this project become a reality and to put us here. So while we might be the faces you're seeing, there's so many more people behind the scenes that got us here. So thank you so much to everybody.